Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Anna. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video. Today we're going to be talking all about budgeting and some easy ways to save money. And I actually got this video as a request from a subscriber, and I've been waiting till the start of the new year to do it because I think that starting the year off fresh with a budget and some saving goals in mind is a really great way to kick off the new year. But if it's the middle of the year and you want to implement this, that's great too. I just feel like the start of the new year is a perfect time to reevaluate your savings goals, and I hope you guys are excited for this video because I am. I think it's a really interesting topic, and I love kind of giving you guys life advice that's a little bit beyond the beauty and fashion realm. So thank you so much for requesting this video, and let's just jump into it. So the first thing to keep in mind before you even start looking at your expenses and budgeting out your spending is think about why you're saving and what your long-term and short-term goals are, because I think that having those goals in mind as you move through this process is really helpful because it keeps you motivated and can kind of act as a mitigant against those moments of weakness when you're about to make an impulse purchase. You can kind of remind yourself of your short-term and long-term goals. And it's also important because you can allocate your savings in multiple ways, so you know what you're saving for long-term, what you're saving for short-term. So for me personally, and I think a lot of people, your kind of long-term savings goal is, you know, if you're younger, maybe to save up to buy a house or to live a comfortable life when you're older. And then short-term, those can be things like wanting to take a vacation or wanting to buy a new car or something like that. So I like to think about my savings in those two different ways because I'll treat that money a little bit differently. I personally believe that you should be investing your savings, whether that's in a mutual fund or an index fund. Those are really easy and low risk ways to invest your money because savings can be making you a lot of money. So that's kind of my first tip, is that before even figuring out, you know, your exact amount of savings, keep in mind that whatever you choose to save, you should really try to invest. I would not recommend, you know, running out and putting it all in Bitcoin or something like that. But if you want to, you know, if you're interested in that and you want to allocate a small portion to kind of risky trades, I think that's cool and good on you. But personally, I prefer lower risk investments. Vanguard's a great place to invest your money. It'll grow slowly but steadily, but you'll make a lot more than you would off of just interest in a bank. So that's my number one tip. And I like to put all my long-term savings, and oftentimes I'll put my short-term savings in there as well, and then just take it out when I need it. And that way it's safe away from you, so you're kind of not even thinking about having that money. But if you're not going to be investing that money and having it tied up in another way, I would at least recommend setting out a separate savings account from your checking account so that you don't have that money as easily accessible, just to kind of put a little bit of separation between you and the spending. I find that that has been really helpful for me, and it just kind of reminds me that I'm saving that money for something else. Just because I have it doesn't mean that it's there to be spent. So with that being said, we'll jump into the whole budgeting process. And there's a couple different ways to start out the budgeting process, but it kind of just depends on where you are with your expenses. So in an ideal world, you would know how much you're making, know how much you want to save, and then be able to structure your costs accordingly. So for example, rent is a huge expense. You would know, like, you know, I only have this much to spend on rent, so I'm going to choose a house that fits that criteria. But a lot of times things like rent or car payments or loan payments, things like that are already fixed, and you can't really control those because you're locked in by contract. But in an ideal world, and what Donnie and I did coming out of college was just start from ground zero and think about how can we save the maximum possible and structured our costs accordingly. So for example, we decided we're living in San Francisco. It's not a cheap place to live, but we chose a very reasonably priced apartment, and we actually decided to do a 2-bedroom, so we share the place with a housemate, and that cuts costs tremendously. But I know for a lot of people, and as we are currently now locked into this lease, you don't have the ability to choose how much rent you're paying. So starting from that point where you do have some fixed costs, the first thing to do is figure out how much you're making each year. And that doesn't mean the amount that you were quoted as your salary and your bonus or whatever. That's the amount you're making post-taxes. So you can go online and you can figure out, you know, income tax calculator. That's going to be state and federal. So figure out how much you're actually taking home at the end of the day. I like to structure my budgets on a monthly basis. And so I think about how much in fixed costs I have, such as rent, loan payments, car payments, things like that, that you know are going to be about the same each month. So that can also be like utilities, internet, you know, break down all of those costs, your cell phone plan, break down all those costs, and then figure out how much you have remaining. And then from there, for kind of the more variable expenses, like, you know, things like shopping for groceries or eating out or just shopping for fun, for clothes, for makeup, I like to break it out into sections. And you can do this yourself and track it in a spreadsheet or something like that to compare at the end of the month with your actual spending. Or what I would recommend doing, and what I've started to do, is use the app called Mint. Basically, it just syncs with your credit card and your bank account, and it tracks your spending, and you can input whatever categories you have, and it'll classify kind of automatically your purchases into those categories, and then it'll give you reminders if you're getting close to your budget, so you actually know when you're kind of overspending in a certain area. And I think it is so helpful and crucial for tracking your expenses and actually staying within your budget. So I highly recommend downloading that app and using it. But I'll go over the basic categories that I have for spending, and if you guys want like a more in-depth how much I actually spend in each of these categories each month, I would be happy to do a blog post on this. My blog is like all over the place. I never really have it quite together, but I really want that to be a goal of this year, to like start using it more to have as like a supplement for my videos. So if you want a more detailed breakdown of this, I would be happy to do that. Let me know in the comments below if that's something you guys would be interested in, and I'd be happy to do it. But moving back to the categories. So the categories that I personally have, and I think this includes everything, but comment below if you think that there's something I'm forgetting, are groceries, eating out, and those are two different categories because I treat them very differently. Transportation, so things like Ubers, stuff like that. Household supplies, beauty essentials, these are things like getting your hair cut, buying essential makeup that you know you're gonna kind of get every couple months, essential hair care products, stuff like that. And then clothes and non-essential beauty items, so that's stuff, you know, like makeup for fun or buying clothes for fun, just because I kind of treat all clothes purchases as like a somewhat optional thing that if I was ever going over in a month, I could definitely cut out. And then fun, which is another kind of, you know, easy to cut down on category. That's just things like going out and getting drinks with friends, going to the movies, you know, things like that. So those are the categories that I break my spending up into, and I input those into Mint, and then I can track and see how much I'm actually spending in each category each month. And that's really, really helpful to have these categories and to be able to kind of refer to them throughout the month, and it just makes it super clear where your money is going and where you can kind of cut back or where you're overspending. So highly recommend breaking down your expenses. And my credit card company, as well as Mint, actually does a pretty good job automatically breaking things into these categories, but sometimes there's a little bit of classification that I have to do, and I like to input my own categories just because I do. So those are the ones that I use. And the way I would actually create like the number budget for each of these categories is just look at your past spending. And if you've been kind of living on your own for a while, you probably have a pretty good idea of what you spend in these categories. But if not, just give yourself like a month or so where you can track your spending on the app and then set budget goals for yourself. And make sure that they're realistic. Don't say that you're never gonna eat out if you know you eat out 5 times a week. It's gonna be very hard to cut down that dramatically. But I'll go into this next, but I have a lot of tips for you guys on great ways to cut down on your spending. And you know, I think that as long as you have a realistic budget in mind, then you should be pretty successful. And then once you know how much you're spending overall, so your total income, net taxes, minus your fixed and your variable costs, that's left over is what you have for savings. And I like to take most of that money and put it towards my long-term savings goals. And then I'll take a little bit of that money that I'll have in my short-term savings for things, you know, like vacations and fun stuff like that. So now we can move on to some of my favorite tips for how to save money. And I'll be happy to do another video talking even more about this, but I thought I would just lump in with this stuff just some of my general tips for saving money. So probably my biggest tip for you guys is to eat out less and to cook meals a lot more. And this is such a no-brainer, but I think that it's one of those things that people often, you know, it just kind of slips away from you. You're busy, you're working, it's fun to go out with friends, whatever the reasons are, people end up spending a lot of money going out and eating out, or just ordering in because they're feeling lazy, and I totally can relate to that. But even if you were to go to the store and buy like microwavable meals or like pre-cooked meals, you'd still be saving money as opposed to going out where on top of, you know, whatever meal you get, you're gonna get a drink, you're gonna end up tipping the server, things like that add up over time. So I would recommend cooking as many meals from scratch as you can because obviously that's the cheapest way to go. But then also buying some kind of frozen foods or like really quick, easy to prepare meals that you can have in a pinch where, you know, you get home from work, you really don't feel like cooking and you'd normally order in, and instead you can kind of heat something up. And if you're near a Costco, Costco's literally my savior. It's like Donnie and I go there basically like once a week. It's just like our grocery store, and we're only 2 people, but usually we can freeze stuff or whatever we buy, you know, doesn't go bad. We buy a lot of rice there, we buy all of our meat there, things like that. You save a lot of money, and it's definitely doable as a single person or as a couple. You just have to buy the right things that you can actually eat through before they go bad or that you can freeze. So Costco, #1. They have like rotisserie chickens and stuff you can buy. Like they have so many great options. I could do a whole video on Costco, to be honest with you, but that's for another time. So that's my first tip, and along with that goes track how much you're spending on coffee. And I like to limit myself at work to 1 coffee out per week and 1 lunch out per week. And other than that, I pack my meals. I'm not a huge coffee drinker, so like not going out for coffee isn't a big deal for me. But if you are a big coffee drinker, make it at home, bring it to work, or I know offices just have coffee machines, so make it and drink it at work. But that's another huge way to cut down on your spending, because you think about it, you do that once a day, 5 days a week, minimum $20 every week, $80 every month. That adds up very, very fast. So reevaluate your coffee drinking habits and your eating out habits, and you can save a ton of money. And then my last kind of general tip is to really justify each purchase you're making, especially if it's non-essential. I mean, obviously don't go to the store and be like, I'm out of toilet paper. Do I really need more toilet paper? Like, yes, you need toilet paper. But when it comes to like, oh, I see this pretty lip gloss and I could sure use a new lip gloss. I mean, do you really need that lip gloss? Do you really? Like, do you have 5 others that are basically the same shade at home? If the answer is yes, like maybe you don't need that lip gloss. And that for me has just been a general changing of my attitude towards shopping, because it's fun to go shopping and it makes you feel good, and every once in a while I need to go out and I want to just shop and spend some money because it's fun and it makes me feel happy. But I try to limit that to once in a blue moon, definitely not every weekend, and I have that built into my budget, but it's a pretty small portion of my budget because personally I would much rather save that money and have experiences with it and save it for travel or save it for my long-term goals. So each person is different, but that's my personal preference. And so when I'm out and I'm shopping and I feel that urge to buy that shirt that I kind of like but probably will just leave in my closet for like months on end and maybe wear once and then like regret buying it, you know, I think about that these days and I just kind of remind myself that it's probably not worth it. And that like little thrill I'm gonna get from buying it is gonna be very short-lived, and then it's just gonna be a regret. So really try to justify whatever purchase you're making. And yeah, I think that those are kind of my general tips. I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions in the comments below or suggestions for me, other viewers, about your tips and tricks for budgeting and savings, I would love to hear them. So leave them down below. And other than that, I will see you all in my next video. Bye guys.